Hi there. Have you been confused by all the information that is available about nutrition? Have you ever thought to yourself, I want to be healthy, but I don't know how in this crazy world? If so, you're in the right place to learn everything you need to know about how you can be your healthiest self by improving your digestion. We'll learn how to make the easiest and healthiest sourdough bread to the truth about yeast and sugar. Join me each week and we'll talk about everything from junk food to your protein needs. We will even dive into some unspoken topics like, what is my bowel movement trying to tell me? Or how can my emotions possibly affect my digestion? For more information on how to be your healthiest self, visit us on healthyselfwithfood.com, where we provide resources including recipes, cooking classes, and coaching appointments. I believe to completely take care of your whole self, that it includes what you put on your body. So I'm very happy to introduce you to our amazing sponsor, Gervine Family Farms, where you can find the best smelling soaps and healing body products on the market. Gervine Family Farms is the home of all natural, real soap and body products that truly heal your skin. Do you regret washing your hands because after you do, your skin is dry and irritated? If so, try the healthiest soap on earth. It is made from coconut oil, essential oil for the smell, and herbs or spices for the soap color. All the ingredients are so healthy for your skin that you could eat them, but please don't eat the soap. It doesn't taste good. There are no fillers, synthetic dyes, fragrances, or low-quality oils. Real soap doesn't strip your skin of all your body's natural oils, thus requiring you to use lotion so that your skin doesn't completely dry out. Save money on lotion by using real soap, and you will never be able to go back to your fake beauty bars that you call soap. Find us at GervineFamilyFarms.com. That is GURVINE FamilyFarms.com. My name is Kaisa. I've always been intrigued about being my healthiest self, even from a very young age. I have been continually studying and testing out all sorts of health options throughout my life. I'm thrilled to be a certified health, life, spiritual, and soul purpose coach, and for the last 10 years, I have enjoyed working as a nutritional counselor in a naturopathic doctor's office. As a nutritional counselor, I guide patients through protocols for their particular health ailment prescribed by their doctor. I also have almost 30 years of experience in making healing food for my 6 children, husband, and friends. This doesn't mean that my food always turned out or tasted good, but they sure were good sports as I learned many tricks and tips that I now can share with you in your food journey. I recently discovered Ayurveda, and I am currently studying to become a digestive specialist. Ayurveda is the knowledge of life. The basic principle of Ayurveda is to prevent and treat illness by maintaining balance in the body. Let's dive into today's topic. Hi, today we're going to talk about the easiest no-knead sourdough sandwich bread. Our ancestors made this kind of bread because they did not have packaged fast-acting yeast. Now there is science to back the reasons that proves that sourdough bread, instead of using yeast, is better for your health. Let's go over the 8 reasons why real sourdough bread is better for your health. The first reason is that sourdough bread is healthier. It has more nutrients. Whole grain sourdough bread contains higher levels of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. Real sourdough bread also contains lower levels of phytic acid, which is an anti-nutrient, which means that it binds with important minerals so you don't absorb them. And therefore, because sourdough bread has lower levels of phytic acid, it allows your body to absorb the nutrients in the bread more easily than those in regular bread. The fermentation process also helps to unlock B vitamins in the bread. The second reason is it's good for your gut. It has more healthy bacteria. Long fermented real sourdough bread provides an increased number of prebiotics and probiotics like properties. Those are the good bacteria, which helps improve your gut health. The healthy bacteria in sourdough bread works to reduce yeast population, which is the bad bacteria in your gut, which helps you to have less chance of an infection or yeast overgrowth of something like candida. Reason 3 is that it's easier to digest. It is lower in gluten. The fermentation process in sourdough will start to break down the starches found in grains before it reaches your stomach. Real sourdough bread is lower in gluten than other breads, which makes it easier to digest. Reason number 4 is there's no added preservatives. It's better for your digestion. If you make your own real sourdough bread at home, you will not add any preservatives like store-bought bread has. Sourdough bread contains acetic acid naturally, which prevents the growth of mold. So real sourdough bread can last up to 2 weeks in your refrigerator. The 5th reason is it's a lower glycemic index food, which means that there's less of a blood sugar spike when you eat it. So compared to other breads, real sourdough bread, because of the fermentation process, won't cause your blood sugar to rise so dramatically. Real sourdough bread contains acidic and lactic acids that slow your digestion of the bread's carbs, which creates a lower glycemic index for this type of bread. Reason 6 is that it's easy to make. It's a no-knead bread recipe and only 4 ingredients. So I'm referring to my particular recipe that I have for this. It is a homemade no-knead sandwich bread which only takes 4 ingredients: flour, water, salt, and your sourdough start. You don't have to add sugar, honey, or oil for it to come out moist and delicious. There is no kneading involved, and it rises in your bread pan into a beautifully sandwich style bread. The 7th reason is it's whole grain. Therefore, it's better for you. Making your own sourdough bread gives you the flexibility to make it with whole grains, which are higher in fiber than processed grains, which is similar to like a white bread flour that you find at the store that's been bleached from wheat. You can use any glutinous flour, whole wheat, white wheat, or an ancient wheat like einkorn to get the benefits from using a whole grain. This recipe allows you to use white flour with great success, but you will be missing the nutrients and fiber that are naturally found in whole grains. The last reason is that it's cheaper to make it yourself than buying it, and you can make it anytime. So making your own real sourdough bread with whole grain flour is the same price or cheaper than real sourdough bread that you can buy at the store that's made with white flour. So for better quality bread all around, you are still paying less. You can buy your flour in bulk to save money per pound. If you have the ingredients on hand, you can make bread anytime and not have to run to the store. For the recipe and class information for learning how to make bread, you can go to healthyselfwithfood.com. Now that we've gone over the reasons why real sourdough bread is better for your health, we're going to talk about how to make it yourself at home. The first thing is that the next part of this episode is going to be an actually cooking demo. We did it as a class, and then we've just added the audio for you to walk through the steps. So one way that this can work really good is if you gather your ingredients together and you follow along. If you were wanting to make bread, this would be a really easy way for you to actually work together with me in the kitchen. We have a video version of it as well, but this is just a nice way that you can just play it and follow along. You're going to need 4 cups of flour. I use einkorn flour, which we will talk about at the end about what it is and about how we're going to provide more information about that. But you can use any flour that you have, 2 cups of water, 2 teaspoons of salt, and 1/4 cup to 1/2 cup of a sourdough start. Now, if you haven't ever made sourdough bread before, the start is going to be very important for your bread to come out, and therefore you're going to have done this step ahead of time. So at the end, we will also talk about how to start your own sourdough start. And so that way, if needed, you can go back and play this particular episode again and go through the demo part, but at least you can listen to it, see how easy it is, start gathering your equipment and supplies, and be ready to do it again in the near future.
Good morning and welcome to Kaisa's Kitchen. I'm really excited for you to join me today. I'm going to take you through the journey of making bread, healthy sourdough bread from start to finish. I have taught a lot of people how to make sourdough bread, but typically we'll have everything ready, and so they'll see how to mix it and then how it's done, but they don't get to see the steps for real in real time. So that's what we're going to do today. I will talk a little bit about the sourdough start and some of the supplies, and that way if you have questions, those will be answered. But my goal is that if you were really interested in making bread, that you could do this in a follow along style. So the one thing that you'd have to have ready first is your sourdough start. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but let's pretend that you are ready to go and you have made your sourdough start and you have it in the refrigerator. First thing I do in the morning on the day that I want to make bread is I take it out of the refrigerator to warm it up. And I just took it out. It's still cold like it was in the refrigerator, and that just keeps it from getting really extra ripe, shall we say. I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay, so I'm going to show you what it looks like when I take it out of the refrigerator. You can see that there are a few little bubbles. That is just a good, healthy start. I have used it recently, and so it is ready to be used, but it needs to be fed. So that's why we warm it up. Like I said, it's kind of cool still. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get some of our flour, which I'll talk a little bit more about our flour, but I'm going to show you how we are going to feed the start. I have a measuring cup for the flour and water. Typically, I do not measure, but I want to do that for you to make it really easy. And I have a plastic spoon. We want to use plastic instead of metal. I know I'm measuring flour and water with metal, but that's okay. It's not sourdough. So it's said that the sourdough, because it's fermented, can react with the metal. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add 1/4 cup of flour to my start. And then I'm going to add 1/4 cup of water. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio of water and flour to feed your start. And this, while it's waking up and warming up, will give it the food it needs to really bubble and be ready for us to use in our bread making process. I just wanted you to see the difference between how it was when we started and what it looks like when we feed it, because it typically will bubble a lot more and it gets really happy. All right, so I'm going to leave this for a few minutes while we talk about some things, but you can already see the happy bubbles. It's already eating and growing, shall we say. All right, so let's talk about the kind of flour that I use. This is einkorn flour. And if you've heard of einkorn flour, it is an ancient grain. So it is an ancient wheat, but it has less chromosomes. So that just means that it is easier to digest. It doesn't have as much going on in it. It hasn't been modified at all. It doesn't have any GMO modifications. And so it's better for your body as far as breaking down. Now, if somebody has a celiac situation, they will not be able to eat einkorn. But anyone that has a gluten sensitivity could be okay eating einkorn in the sourdough form because it breaks down most of the gluten because of the makeup of einkorn. You can use regular wheat flour. You can use white wheat or white flour to make this. I haven't done it with any other flours besides those three. I like to grind my grains so that they're fresh. You can kind of see I did a little bit this morning. I've got a nice mess going on. We've got the mock mill that does grinding the grain, and we pour it here in the top and just turn it on. We've got it already set to the finest grain so that it'll be a nice bread flour. And I have einkorn in bulk, like I buy big bags of 25-pound bags. And so I can show you what that looks like. This is what an einkorn grain looks like. It looks similar to a wheat grain. May even look a little bit like brown rice. Then we would just pour the grain into the top here and then turn it on. So I've already ground flour. Here we'll show you what the flour freshly ground looks like. It's nice and fluffy. It's not too brown, not too white. So it's a nice combination. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to let our start sit. We have it bubbling and happy. And we're going to let it sit for a few hours. So I generally do about 9 o'clock in the morning. I take it out of the fridge when I know I want to make bread. I feed it and warm it up by allowing it to sit out on the counter. I will generally put the lid back on to keep any flies, dust, or anything else from getting in there. And then about lunchtime, we'll come back and we will mix up the bread. So I'll show you how we do that. See you in a little while. Welcome back to Kaisa's Kitchen. It's been 3 hours since we woke up our start and fed it. I'm going to show you what it looks like now. Got all those great bubbles. You can see the consistency. They call it like pancake batter. So it's thick enough, but not super thin. So that's the consistency of our start. And we'll talk a little bit more about the start because a lot of people have questions about how to start a start. But we're going to assume at this point that you have a sourdough start ready to go. And if you had it ready, first thing, you wouldn't have to go through the first step of waking it up out of the refrigerator and feeding it. If your start was fed and ready to go and warm, this will be your first step that we're doing right now. So we're going to have a bowl that has a lid so that we can actually mix up our bread dough, and it's going to have to sit for a while. So again, I am using einkorn flour today. We had ground some fresh. If you're using wheat flour or bread flour, white flour, any of that kind of stuff, all the instructions are the same. I am using a half cup, but if we imagine this is a 1 cup, we are going to be doing 2 cups of flour. I'm using the smaller one because I don't like to dirty a lot of dishes, and I'm going to use it for the start as well. So first we're going to measure out our flour. So that's our flour. I like to use, this is like a rice scooper stir. It works really well for actually mixing our dough together. The next thing we're going to measure in is our start. Now, it's close to a half a cup. It doesn't have to be exact. If I have a pretty full jar, so I'm going to go ahead and use the full half cup because I have plenty to spare. But if you were making multiple loaves of bread or you didn't quite have that much start, you do not need to use a full half cup. It can be closer to a 1/4 cup. But today I have a plenty of start. Okay, so that is our start and our flour. I'm going to show you there's the start in there and the flour. And now we're going to do water. And again, it's going to be 2 cups of water. That's 1 cup. And 2 cups. Now this is the easiest recipe when it comes to making sourdough bread. There's a lot of different ways that bread can be made. Artesian loaves and things that can be shaped in different ways. But this one, we are going to be using a bread pan, and it will come out like sandwich bread. Next, we're going to do our salt. And we are going to do 2 teaspoons of salt, and I like to use pink Himalayan salt, so you can see the salt there. And I'm going to do 2 teaspoons. Now I've noticed something today as I'm mixing up this bread. You can see the nice bubbles that the dough is making. I've noticed though that it's not as thick as it usually is. And And it could be because I'm using this half cup to measure out my 1 cups of dough, flour. And typically I use a 1 cup measuring cup. So because I know the consistency of how the dough should be, I feel like this is a little bit wet. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more flour. And that's mostly just because I fresh ground it, like literally just ground it into this bowl, whereas usually I've ground it, put it into my container, and it's settled more. And so you'll find if that happens with your flour, that it does actually have a different consistency. If you buy flour from the store and it's already in a bag, it's already going to have settled and it won't be as fluffy and light. So this is a much better consistency. Hopefully you can see the difference. It was pretty soft and liquidy. And it still is. Like, this isn't typically what a bread dough would look like. People wouldn't say, oh, that looks like bread. It looks more like a batter. But this is how we want it. So we are actually done. This is how we're going to leave this dough. I want you to look at it, and then when we come back, and it'll be 6 hours. We're going to let it sit and ferment for 6 hours. When we come back in 6 hours, I'll show you what the dough looks like. It doesn't always change a lot of look, like not necessarily more bubbles, but it will raise or fill up the bowl a bit more. So I'm going to put the lid on, pop the air out, and I'm going to leave this to sit for 6 hours until we come back, and then we'll be putting it into the pans. And we'll talk more about the pans, how to grease them, and what those pans are all about. I will have information for you on starting your own start so that you have what you need to do this, because it's super easy once you've got the start going. All right, we'll see you in a little while. Hi, okay, welcome back. Our dough mixture has sat for 6 hours. First, I want to show you the start. After we had used the start in our bread dough mixture, I fed it, and now you can see that it's nice and bubbly and happy. So I just wanted to show you that before I put it back in the refrigerator. So now I'm going to put my start in the refrigerator until next week when I decide that I want to make some more bread. I tend to make bread once a week, and I like to do 2 loaves. So I also wanted to tell you about the pans. I like to use cast iron. I've used stainless steel, just regular bread pans, but I really like the cast iron. They come out of the pan really well. But there's 2 different kinds. The first pan that I got is a Lodge. So you can kind of see, that it says Lodge on the bottom of the pan, and the shape of it, you can kind of see it's narrow and it's taller. I couldn't get more of these at the time, and I wanted a few more. And so this is a Camp Chef brand, Camp Chef brand, and you can see that it is wider and not quite as tall. So I wanted to make the bread. I'm going to make 2 batches, and it's the dough right now, after we put it into the pan, is going to rise for at least 3 hours. I like to keep an eye on it, and you can kind of see it as it's moving in the pan and gets higher. We don't want it to go all the way up to the sides or over, but you can tell that it's rising, and then that's the time that we want to cook it. It's generally about 2 to 4 hours, depending on the temperature in your house. And then when we cook these 2, we take them out, you can kind of see the difference in the loaves. They still come out great. They both come out as bread, but it's just neat to kind of see the differences. Okay, I'm going to show you what the dough itself looks like. You can see it has some bubbles in it, that it has been fermenting, and it's getting happy. And so we can tell that it's ready to be put into the pan. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use coconut oil to grease the pans. So I'm just going to do one of them, show you how we just spread the coconut oil around. I like using coconut oil more than like a spray because it's not thick enough, but also I like just straight oil, not the contents of like canola oil or the additives or things they might put in a spray one. You wouldn't want to use olive oil because it's too liquidy and isn't as good of a high heat oil. Avocado oil is a good high heat oil, but it's liquid, and so then it doesn't spread around in the pan the same way. So you can see We've got the coconut oil that you can actually see, you know, how thick and spread around it is. That's going to keep it from sticking while it's cooking. I like to use my rice scooper, but I call it a scraper for bread dough. And I'm going to scrape it into the pan. All right, so the first thing I'm going to show you is how I just scrape the dough off the sides so that it's not sticking. And then I'm going to pour it right into the pan. All right, so you can see that it scrapes out of the bowl fairly easy. You're not going to get every little single gooey bit, but we're going to get the majority of it. You can see the consistency of the dough. Sometimes it's a little bit thicker, but generally you don't want it any thinner than what we've got here. This is going to cook up real nicely, but if it's too thick, it's a lot harder for it to scrape into the pan. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to get a clean towel and I'm going to cover the pan just so that we don't get any dust, dirt, flies, fingers, any of that kind of stuff from people in the household into your dough, and just cover it. Let it rise for 2 to 3 hours. You can check on it if you want to, but we'll meet you back here soon to show you us putting it in the oven and then when it comes out. See you then. Hi, and welcome back. We have our bread in bread pans. I'm going to show it to you. It's been sitting in the pans for 3 hours. So you can see the bubbles in it. It hasn't risen a lot. Sometimes that happens, but we're going to be able to see what it looks like when we put it in the oven. So we've set the oven at 425. We're going to stick these in for 45 minutes, and then we'll show you what they look like when they come out. Okay, we're back with our bread that has been cooked now for 45 minutes at 425 degrees. And today is actually quite a cold day where we're at, and so I noticed that the bread didn't rise as much as it usually does, but it still did some rising. So first I'm going to show it to you. You can see that it domed a little bit so that it rose while it was cooking, but it didn't rise all the way up to the top of the pan like I would have really liked. But that's just a matter of time. If I had let it rise for longer, it would have still kept rising. But for the sake of this video, I wanted to make sure that we got it done in time to show you. This is the more narrow pan. So you can see it's not very deep bread, but it still makes really good bread. And this is the wider pan. They come out real easy, which is nice when you when we put the coconut oil on there. It really helps the bread slide out of the pan nicely. I like to do it right when it comes out of the oven so that it doesn't stay in the pan and sweat. But this one is even more narrow, but it still will be really good. So I want to show you the inside of it and how this bread has a nice light texture to it. So there you can see the bubbles and the air and how it rose, and that it's got a nice spring to it. So it makes great toast, and it has good flavor, but you can see it's a really easy bread to make. It doesn't take a lot of ingredients. It doesn't take a lot of time. I mean, it did take the whole day, but we didn't have to take very much time in each stage. So for the sake of this video, we'll put it all together and you'll see it doesn't take very long overall. But you end up with a nice bread that makes good toast. If it does raise more and get taller, it can make good sandwiches, that kind of thing. But hope that you've learned some good things. We'll put the information in this video with like the recipe and instructions and things like that. So good luck in your bread making journey.
Now that you've walked through the bread making process with me in that demo, I want to follow up on a few bits of information that I promised you. We did talk a little bit about the different kinds of pans, bread pans, that can be used. And particularly, I really like the cast iron pans. They last forever, they're durable, and you can use them in a fire if needed, as opposed to just your oven. Now, that's not the way I make bread, but it's nice to know that they are very versatile. So you can search on the internet for lodge or campfire, camp chef. Sorry, I said that wrong. Then the other thing was that we used a mock mill for grinding our grains, and einkorn.com, which is going to be doing a near future podcast going over everything about einkorn. They offer the mock mill at a discounted price when you buy einkorn through them. And so that's one way to get it, but you could also search for mock mill. It's an amazing mill for grinding grains. I've used lots of other kinds of grinders and they've worked, but I really like this one the best. And we'll go into those details in that future podcast on einkorn. The last bit of really important information you need is starting your own sourdough start. Now, there's lots of ways on the internet that you can buy starts. They can be dehydrated, or you can get one from someone that you know that already has one growing, and they often need to discard or continue to use it, and they may be willing to share it. When I do my classes in person, I'm able to provide start to those in person, but obviously that's not going to be the case for all of us learning and listening to this together. So I want you to know that it's really easy for you to start your own start, because it only takes whatever flour you want to use to make your bread and water. You'll need a glass mason type jar. Doesn't have to be mason, it could be a recycled, washed out jar of some sort. Ideally, a plastic lid as opposed to metal, so that as it ferments, you don't have any reaction to the metal. You're always going to want to use a plastic spoon, and you're going to start out with, depending on the size of your jar, anywhere from a half a cup to a cup of flour and the same amount of water. Stir it and get a good consistency so you can practice seeing how it needs to look like pancake batter, a thicker-ish pancake batter. And a lot of times people feel like this is kind of a science or an art. They're not, depends on your perspective on it. And so the main thing is that you need to understand is you don't want to get hung up or frustrated with, do I have the right consistency? You just have to remember that in the beginning of you creating the start that you're going to then leave out on your counter, you are having it heat up or be at room temperature to where it is going to naturally do its process of breaking down the flour, and the natural bacteria will do all of the work. So the process is having this jar with your mixture sitting on the counter for at least 7 days. Each day about 24 hours apart, could be a little bit longer in the first step or first day if you don't notice bubbles yet. You're going to be looking for little bits of bubble action happening, which is telling you that the process has started and it's breaking down the flour and fermenting it. And once you see that, that's when you know it's time to feed your start. And that's why you don't want to start with too much flour in your jar to begin with, because each day you're going to feed it. And you don't need to feed it a lot. It could be, a quarter of a cup, or even just a tablespoon or two at a time. And it'll just be 1 to 1. Tablespoon of water, tablespoon of flour, or whatever amount you choose. But just remember that as you add that, it's going to grow in the jar. So at some point, it's going to fill up your jar to the point where you're like, I got too much start in here. What do I do now? And those are the times that it's nice to use that start for things like pancakes, quick bread, muffins, and other things that the sourdough start is really nice in, but it's not going to be a long fermented item. Your sandwich bread that we make is a long ferment because it's almost 24 hours between starting it, mixing it, it's sitting, and you cooking it. And so that's considered a long ferment. Other things that maybe just sit for an hour and then you cook them, or you just mix it right up and use it. You still get the benefits of the start that's in that recipe, but it won't be the same as the benefits from a long ferment. But this is a great way to use excess sourdough start. This excess sourdough start is often called discard. So if you want to search and look for some recipes that specifically use sourdough discard, that's a great way to use this, just so you're not wasting it. As your start is sitting on the counter, it may need to be fed closer to like 12 hours apart. The key thing is just to kind of keep an eye on it. There's no set amount of time because it's all about temperature, and that's where the science parts comes in, is that depending on the temperature of your house, the start could, eat and break down and do its work faster. Or if it's really cold, you'll find that the process is a little bit slower. So just don't give up. You're looking for it to double in size and to bubble and do things that tells you that it's alive. And because it's alive, it's digesting that flour, and it needs to then be fed when it's empty. If you forget about your start for like a day or two and you come back and you notice that there's a layer of liquid on the top, that is because the bacteria has broken down the flour to the point that they don't have anything else to eat. And so the liquid's just sitting on there. You can go ahead and just pour off that liquid. It can be anywhere from clear to, depending on how long it sits, it can get really like dark, like almost black. That's okay, as long as you don't have mold. Now, this is always the scary part for people. They get really nervous. But if you keep your jar clean and there's just maybe a patch of mold on the top of the start, or on a little spot on the side of the jar, you can scrape that off and keep your start, even if you just transfer it to a clean jar, so that it's not touching or being a part of that mold. You can do that and still save your start. It's good to know about this particular step because it will happen later when you're storing your start in the refrigerator, because you don't need to make bread maybe all the time. And if a whole week goes by, it's definitely going to have a layer of that liquid because it ran out of food. But it's still alive. It takes a lot to kill a start. And so one thing, is like a black mold, not the black water, but like fuzzy, disgusting looking mold. That could be a way to say, this start, has died. And best case, just start over again. But hopefully what you can do is just keep it going. And I haven't had that happen where I've had to actually like throw away a start. I've always been able to pour off that water, feed it, and then often there comes a point where I want to put it into a clean jar, just because, there's enough of the like thin layer of dried dough basically on the outside of the jar, and I don't want to scrape that into my start. And so I just start a new jar, just pour in my good contents into a clean jar. So there's just a few things, nothing to be afraid of. It's totally doable. It's not, I know it feels like it can be a lot of work because you're like, oh, I always got to keep an eye on it. But you go into your kitchen at least once a day. And that once a day, if that jar is sitting there somewhere where you can see it, there's no reason why you can't check on it. And feeding it literally takes seconds when it's out and warm. Now, once it's in the refrigerator, I get that that's harder. So then you want to get on a system of cooking bread once a week so that your start stays alive. Or just feed it once a week, and maybe you only make bread once a month. Like, it just depends on you, your family, and your schedule and what you need. But the start does need to be fed at least once a week in the refrigerator. Hopefully these tips have helped you. You can always find more information on the internet. There's lots of people that talk about starts and how to do them, so you can follow those instructions as well. But I hope that this has helped and that you are excited about starting your bread journey. So to be your healthiest self, join me each week as we talk about a new topic that can help you, your family, and your loved ones in your life to be your healthiest self.